Second point, and this is related to that, those people who escape the fire do so not on the Prophet's authority but on Allah's authority. Allah is the person who will choose how many people are taken out of the fire. At the first attempt, at the second attempt, at the third attempt. It is Allah's choice, not the Prophet ﷺ's choice. Third point, and perhaps this needs the stressing the most, is that people should not depend on shafa'ah. People should not think that in this world we can do whatever we want, how many bad amals we can, as long as we've had la ilaha illallah, we'll be saved. Because the Prophet will do shafa'ah for us. This kind of concept is totally wrong. Why? And I'll remind you why. Because the Prophet said he will do shafa'ah for some people who are already in the fire of hell. Muslims who are in the fire of hell. And then from the Prophet's safarish and from his intercession, they will be taken out. So that means that there will be Muslims, the bad Muslims obviously, the sinners, who will be in the fire of hell for a period of time. And then they will eventually be taken out by the Prophet ﷺ's shafa'ah, his intercession. So whose skin out of us lot do you think can actually bear the fire of hell for a moment? For a second even? And we do not need to go into the details of how horrendous and how horrid the fire of hell is. So to think that a person does whatever he wants in this world just depending on the Prophet's shafa'ah is total foolishness. It's total stupidity. Because no one in their right mind, from once they have seen the descriptions of the fire of hell, will want to stay there for even a split second. So do not depend on shafa'ah. Shafa'ah is a blessing. It is a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon His ummah. But it is not a means to completely escape us from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once the Prophet's shafa'ah is complete, other people and other objects will do shafa'ah. We are told that other prophets will do it, for example. The scholars, the ulama ikram, they will perform shafa'ah. The shuhada, the martyrs, the angels, they will perform shafa'ah for the believers on that day. Interesting, the Quran itself will perform shafa'ah. And fasting, and this is a hadith mentioned in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. On the day of judgment, the Quran and fasting will come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fasting will say that, Ya Allah, this person, I stopped him from eating during the day. So please accept my intercession on his behalf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept it. The Quran will say that, Ya Allah, I stopped this person from sleeping at night because he was reciting me. Please perform shafa'ah for him. Please accept this shafa'ah. And the Prophet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept this intercession on that day. And then finally, there were other means and there were other methods of actually gaining the shafa'ah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'll quickly mention three. Firstly, the dua that we perform after the azan. Allahumma rabba hazihi ad-da'wati at-tammah was-salati al-qa'imah. When we perform this dua, the Prophet said in countless ahadith, when a person reads that with sincerity and with love, then my shafa'ah becomes compulsory upon that person. So this is one means of gaining his intercession. Secondly, in a famous hadith which has been mentioned by Imam Sakhawi in Maqasid al-Hasana, that when a person upon hearing the name of Sayyidina Rasulullah, he kisses his thumbs and he places them on his eyes, then this is also a means of making the shafa'ah of the Prophet halal for him. This is why we perform this mustahab act. And thirdly, and it is the season of Hajj, that when a person performs the Hajj and then he visits the grave of the Prophet ﷺ, then this is also a means of gaining his shafa'ah. Man zara qabri wajabat lahu shafa'ati. That whoever visits my grave, the Prophet ﷺ said, then my shafa'ah becomes wajib upon him. This is just a small selection of ways that a person can win the intercession of our beloved Messenger ﷺ. Inshallah, we'll have question and answers now. But there's two books that I would like to, if you already have not read them or purchased and bought them, certainly it would interest you to buy it related to this lesson. The first one, Dajjal the Antichrist. Some of you might have already read that, I hope. It's a very, very famous book written by Ahmed Thompson a good 20 years ago. And it's been reprinted recently. Ahmed Thompson's style of writing is phenomenal. It will attract your attention, and it will leave you in tears, to be honest. And because of the the stories we have been hearing in the banking system in the last couple of years, this is more topical than ever. Because he does mention in the later sections about the capitalist system and the shortcomings of it. But it's titled The Jolly Antichrist. It's a brilliant read, and if you haven't got it, certainly I would recommend you to purchase it. A lot of today's dars has been taken from the Ihya of Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi. Abdul Hakim Murad, Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad, who is a professor at Cambridge University, he has translated one of the chapters of it, Kitabul Zikr al-Mawti wa ma ba'dahu, the remembrance of death and the afterlife. And so that whole section has been translated of Imam Ghazali's work. Brilliantly translated. That certainly I will say that there is no substitute for Imam Ghazali's literary style, because it's hard-hitting, it's beautifully written in Arabic, the way Imam Ghazali actually writes in Arabic. There's no substitute for that. But Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad has done a wonderful job in trying to relay that kind of message. And I think in one of the footnotes, the details of this book have been mentioned. But certainly this is something that you can find in good bookshops, you can find online as well. And it is definitely worth having a copy of this. Jazakallah. Very quickly, next week we will be talking about wal-qadr khayrihi wa sharrihi min Allah ta'ala. A very sensitive topic, and I will say in advance that we will not go into very intrinsic detail into that. And the reason being that the Prophet ﷺ himself warned people to be wary about the sensitivity of this issue. However, what we will do is we will look at certain groups that have appeared over the period of history, which have had certain views on Qadr. In particular, the Qadariyas and the Jabariyas. They had contrasting views, and we will talk about these early sects in Islam and what they had to say upon this topic. And then one of the other things we will mention is this idea about believing in fate. Does it actually lead to apathy? That if Allah has already decided that I'm going to read namaz in an hour's time, or I'm not going to read it, does that mean that it's in His hands and I shouldn't be worrying about it too much? That if Allah has already written that we are destined to Jannat or Jahannam, then can we do anything about that? It's a very sensitive issue and it needs to be approached very carefully. These are some of the areas that we will inshallah ta'ala cover next week. Jazakallah khairah.